They looked perfect. That was the first thing everyone said about them. The first thing neighbors mentioned when the investigators came knocking. The first thing friends offered when asked to describe the couple who lived in the pretty pink house on Bayview Drive in Port Dalhousie, Ontario. They looked perfect. Paul was tall and blonde and handsome in the specific way that makes people assume goodness. Carla was pretty and warm and the kind of woman who remembered your birthday and brought food when you were sick and smiled at you across the fence with the easy confidence of someone who has nothing to hide. They called them Ken and Barbie, not as an insult, as a compliment, as the shorthand that people reach for when a couple seems too attractive and too happy and too well matched to be entirely real. The nickname was meant affectionately. It was meant to capture something about the specific wholesome perfection they projected to everyone who encountered them. It captured something else entirely. Something that nobody standing in that neighborhood on those ordinary days understood yet. Inside the pretty pink house on Bayview Drive, two teenage girls were being tortured. Leslie Mahaffey was 14 years old. She had the particular energy of a teenager navigating the complicated geography between childhood and adulthood, sometimes older than her years, sometimes exactly her age, always completely and specifically herself. She had friends and fights and the kind of social life that 14-year-olds build with the intense seriousness of people for whom the immediate world is the whole world. She had a curfew she sometimes missed. On the night of June 14, 1991, Leslie Mahaffey was locked out of her family home in Burlington, Ontario after missing her curfew. She was outside, in the dark, in the specific vulnerability of a teenage girl who has miscalculated the time and now faces the consequences of that miscalculation with the resources available to a 14-year-old on a summer night. Paul Bernardo found her. He was the Scarborough rapist, though the police did not yet know his name. He had been attacking women in the Scarborough area of Toronto since 1987. He had been described by survivors. He had been investigated. His name had even appeared in the pool of suspects collected during the investigation. His DNA had been submitted for testing in 1990. The results that would have identified him were sitting in a backlog at the Center of Forensic Sciences, unprocessed, waiting, while his DNA waited in a government backlog. Paul Bernardo found Leslie Mahaffey outside her family home at midnight and brought her to the pretty pink house in Port Dalhousie. She was never seen alive again. Carla Homolka was not a passive witness. That is the detail that transforms this story from a narrative about a predatory man and his unwitting partner into something far more complex and far more disturbing. Carla Homolka was an active and willing participant in what happened inside that house. She was not coerced into the room. She was not threatened into silence after the fact. She was present. She was involved. She smiled at the camera. They filmed everything. That detail requires its own moment of stillness, because it speaks to a level of calculated deliberateness that goes beyond the impulsive violence of rage or the fractured logic of mental illness into something colder and more intentional. They filmed what they did to Leslie Mahaffey. They filmed what they did to Kristen French. They created a record of their crimes with the specific confidence of people who believed those recordings would never be seen by anyone outside that house. They were wrong, but before they were wrong, they were very confident, and in the space of that confidence, two girls died in a house where the neighbors brought casseroles and waved from driveways and called the couple inside Ken and Barbie. Here is what the neighborhood did not know. It did not know that before Leslie Mahaffey, before the pretty pink house in Port Dalhousie became the location it would become in Canadian criminal history, Paul Bernardo had already done something that should have ended everything before it began. On December 23, 1990, 6 months before Leslie Mahaffey disappeared, Carla Homolka's 15-year-old sister Tammy was drugged with animal tranquilizers that Carla had stolen from the veterinary clinic where she worked. She was raped by Paul Bernardo while Carla assisted. Tammy Homolka died that night from asphyxiation on her own vomit. The death was ruled accidental. The family buried Tammy and grieved her and did not know. Carla knew She had drugged her own sister. She had stolen the sedatives from her workplace. She had participated in what was done to Tammy while their parents slept upstairs in the same house. She had watched her sister die and helped construct the story that turned a murder into an accident. She continued living in that family home. She continued her relationship with Paul Bernardo. She married him in June of 1991, 12 days after Leslie Mahaffey disappeared. The wedding photographs show a radiant bride and a handsome groom, and the celebration full of people who had no idea what the couple at the center of it had done and were capable of doing. The wedding was beautiful. Leslie Mahaffey's dismembered body was found encased in concrete in Lake Gibson 2 days after that wedding. Kristen French was 15 years old. She was walking home from school in St. Catharines, Ontario on April 16, 1992. It was a Thursday afternoon. She was on a familiar route, the kind of walk that becomes automatic through repetition, the kind of path that feels safe because it has always been safe. She was approximately a 10-minute walk from her front door. A car pulled up beside her. Carla Homolka got out of the car and asked Kristen for directions, holding a map. It was a ruse so carefully constructed and so deliberately non-threatening. A young woman, not a man, asking for a help with directions, that Kristen French stopped to help. Because that is what a decent 15-year-old girl does when a young woman asks for help. She stopped. She leaned toward the map, and Paul Bernardo came from the other side. Kristen French was in the car before she fully understood what was happening. She was held in the house on Bayview Drive for 3 days. 3 days. 96 hours inside the pretty pink house where the neighbors waved from driveways, and the couple inside was called Ken and Barbie. 3 days of what the court documents describe in language that legal necessity forces into clinical precision, but that no clinical precision can fully contain. She was killed on Easter Sunday, April 19, 1992. Her body was found 16 days later in a ditch in Burlington. Her hair had been cut. The cutting of her hair was deliberate and would later be understood as an act of additional degradation performed after her death by the people who had held her for 3 days in a suburban house in Port Dalhousie. Here is where the story twists in a direction that the stomach cannot immediately absorb, because Carla Homolka made a deal. In February of 1993, Paul Bernardo was arrested. In the months that followed, as the investigation began assembling the full picture of what had happened inside the house on Bayview Drive, Carla Homolka approached prosecutors and offered them something they believed they needed: her testimony against Paul Bernardo, the insider account of the crimes from someone who had been present for all of them. In exchange, she negotiated a plea agreement that would become one of the most controversial decisions in Canadian legal history. She pleaded guilty to 2 counts of manslaughter, not murder, manslaughter, for the deaths of Kristen French and Leslie Mahaffey. She was sentenced to 12 years in prison. She presented herself as a battered woman, a victim of Paul Bernardo's control and violence, a woman who had participated in these crimes under duress and psychological manipulation. She was articulate and composed and credible in the way that people who have been performing 4 years are credible. Prosecutors called it a deal with the devil. They made it anyway, because they believed the videotapes, the recordings Paul and Carla had made of their crimes, were gone. Bernardo had told investigators the tapes had been destroyed. Without Carla's testimony, prosecutors feared they could not secure a conviction on the full weight of the crimes. The tapes had not been destroyed. Paul Bernardo's lawyer found them hidden in the ceiling of the house on Bayview Drive during the search of the property. He held them for 17 months before surrendering them to authorities. By the time those tapes were in the hands of prosecutors, the deal with Carla Homolka was already signed. The tapes showed everything. They showed a woman who was not a passive victim. They showed a woman who was present and active, and who smiled at the camera with the ease of someone who was exactly where she wanted to be. The deal could not be undone. Paul Bernardo's trial began in 1995. The videotapes were played in a courtroom that was close to the public. Journalists were permitted to attend, but banned from reporting the specific content of what the tape showed. The judge who viewed them described the experience in terms that made clear that the legal language of the indictment, sexual assault, forcible confinement, murder, was entirely insufficient to capture what those recordings documented. Paul Bernardo was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of aggravated sexual assault, 2 counts of forcible confinement, 2 counts of kidnapping. He was designated a dangerous offender. He was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. He applied for parole in 2023. He was denied. He's still in prison. He will almost certainly die there. Karla Homolka served her 12-year sentence. She was released in 2005. She moved to Quebec. She changed her name. She married. She had children. She built a life in the specific way that people who have negotiated their freedom build lives, carefully, quietly, in places where the name they were born with does not follow them. She's living that life right now. The house on Bayview Drive was demolished. The pretty pink house where the neighbors waved from driveways and called the couple inside Ken and Barbie, where 2 teenage girls spent their last days alive, where videotapes recorded things that a judge could not describe in sufficient language, where Karla Homolka helped drug her own sister 6 months before Leslie Mahaffey disappeared. That house was torn down. The lot sat empty 4 years, a wound in the streetscape of a neighborhood that had believed itself ordinary. A space where a house used to be that nobody wanted to fill because filling it required deciding what to build on ground that carried the specific weight of what had happened there. Eventually something was built there. Life continues in the way that life continues around the sites of terrible things, with the particular insistence of a world that cannot afford to stop moving. But the address remains, the way addresses always remain, and the people who lived on that street during those years carry the knowledge of what was happening behind the facade of the perfect couple in the pretty pink house in ways that do not leave when the house does. The families of Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French have never fully left the rooms where the worst of their lives happened. Dana French, Kristen's mother, became one of Canada's most prominent victims' rights advocates in the years following her daughter's murder. She turned grief into action with the specific determination of a mother who cannot bring her daughter back, but can refuse to let her daughter's death mean nothing. She fought for changes to the laws governing plea bargains. She fought for the rights of victims' families to have standing in the processes that determine what happens to the people who destroyed their families. She fought every single day in the years after. Easter Sunday 1992, with the full weight of a mother who had lost the most important person in her world to 2 people who called themselves Ken and Barbie and smiled at their neighbors across the fence. The Mahaffey family carried the same weight through the same years with the same determination and the same grief and the same absence at the center of their lives, where Leslie used to be. A 14-year-old girl who sometimes missed her curfew. A 15-year-old girl who stopped to help a young woman with a map. To ordinary teenagers on ordinary days in ordinary Ontario towns who encountered the most calculated evil hiding behind the most ordinary suburban facade. There is a specific lesson in this story that does not fit comfortably into the category of lesson. It is not the lesson about stranger danger that parents rehearse with their children, because the danger that found Leslie Mahaffey was waiting in the dark outside her own home, and the danger that found Kristen French approached her in the form of a young woman asking for directions. Neither of those scenarios maps onto the simple cautionary frameworks that safety education provides. It is not the lesson about trusting your instincts, because Kristen French's instincts told her that a young woman needing directions was safe, and those instincts were correct about every other young woman who had ever asked her for help, and would have been correct about every young woman who would ask her after. The instinct was not wrong. The people who exploited it were. The lesson, if it can be called that, is about facades, about the specific and devastating human capacity to construct a surface that bears no relationship to the reality beneath it, about the Ken and Barbie couple in the pretty pink house who were simultaneously the most normal looking people on the street and the most dangerous. About the systems, the DNA backlog, the plea agreement, the lawyer who held the tapes for 17 months, that failed the girls inside that house at every available opportunity. About Carla Homolka, who is somewhere in Canada right now, living under a different name, with children who may not know their mother's history, with neighbors who wave from driveways and have no idea. Leslie Mahaffey was 14 years old. She was outside her house on a summer night because she had missed her curfew. That was the full extent of her error, an error that millions of teenagers make on millions of summer nights without consequence, an error that should have resulted in a conversation with her parents in the morning and a slightly earlier curfew the following weekend. Kristen French was 15 years old. She stopped to help a young woman who appeared to need directions. That was the full extent of her involvement in the chain of events that ended her life, an act of ordinary human decency that she had every reason to believe was safe, and that would have been safe in the hands of any other person on any other street on any other afternoon. Both of them deserve to grow up. Both of them deserve the ordinary accumulation of a Canadian life lived forward through the years that were taken from them in a pink house on Bayview Drive, while the neighbors waved and called the couple inside by the names of two plastic dolls. The dolls smiled no matter what you did to them. So did Ken and Barbie. The house is gone. The tapes are in an evidence vault. Paul Bernardo is in a cell he will likely never leave. Carla Homolka is living a life that Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French were never given the chance to live. The neighborhood on Bayview Drive still exists. The people who waved at the perfect couple from their driveways still live with the knowledge of what was happening behind the smile and the facade and the pretty pink paint. Leslie was 14. Kristen was 15. They were ordinary girls on ordinary days who deserved ordinary lives. The most dangerous thing in the neighborhood was the most normal looking thing in it. It always is.